Hello and welcome back to KXAN Plus. I'm your host, Esmeralda Zamora, and today we have our chief meteorologist, Nick Bannin, here to talk about Nick's first warning weather.
Hi, how you doing, Esme?
How are you doing, Nick?
I'm good.
We tried to do this yesterday, but
We did.
unfortunately we had some technical difficulties.
I know.
So we've rescheduled, but these lake level projections are still a hot topic on our website.
Yeah, it still stands. These projections that we'll go into detail on get updated from LCRA once a month. So at the beginning of a new month, they look at what the lake and lakes have done, where the levels are at the beginning of the month, and then they basically walk you through different scenarios of, okay, if it's really wet, what would the lakes do? If it's really dry, what would the lakes do? If it's somewhere in the middle, what would the lakes do? So LCRA have now updated those projections to include the incredibly rapid rises in both Lakes Travis and Bannin that we saw at the beginning of July, and that's now incorporated in the projections going forward. So we have a better idea now when Lake Travis could fill up under varying scenarios, and when Lake Bannin could go back to full. It is very close to full now. It's at 99%, so it's basically full. So today we're going to walk you through the different scenarios. They're not so much a forecast of what's expected, but more if it's wet, if it's dry, this is what the lake should do. So we'll take you through those now.
Before before you take us through that, what was August projected to be? Wetter than normal, drier than normal?
Yeah, so from my recollection anyway, I think it was projected to be leaning a little wetter than normal. We've started off actually drier than normal in Austin at Camp Mabry, but the airport picked up 3/4 of an inch of rain yesterday, which actually brought it back closer to normal. So sometimes it depends on the site. Some areas have actually had a wetter than normal start to August, but Austin's Camp Mabry and really most of the area has started August on the drier side, even though we've had almost daily opportunities for rain over the last few days.
Even this weekend, the opportunities are still lingering ahead.
Yeah, those rain chances actually jump here this weekend due to a potential tropical development happening in the Gulf. We'll be getting into that on KXAN News at 4. We'll get some fresh information on the projections for that. National Hurricane Center, as of now, giving it a 40% chance of being a tropical depression or stronger. But either way, it does boost our rain chances as we go into the weekend. So some opportunities for rain, also some opportunities for heavy rain in spots into the weekend. But again, we'll talk about that on KXAN at 4.
Well, let's dive into these projections.
Yeah.
Let me see what your first slide is, because now I'm clicking the slides.
Yes, I know. We've got you in charge of these today. So first of all, before we show you the scenarios, I want to talk about what these scenarios mean. And first, the scenarios are based on percentiles. So a wet year, according to LCRA, is a year when only 25% of years are wetter, and yet 75% of years are drier. So doesn't necessarily mean the wettest of all years, but it's up there. It's in the top quarter of wet years. Now, when they're talking about median conditions going forward, that means that, say, half of the years would be wetter and half of the years would be drier. Kind of middle of the road there. Not technically the average. The average is mean. But we're looking at the median here, so the middle of the years. And then what they consider a dry scenario would be where only 10% of years were drier than that, meaning 90% of years were wetter. And then extremely dry scenarios would mean only 1% of years would be drier than this, and 99% of years would be wetter. And I don't know if Esme, if you have the ability to go sort of back and forth to this first slide as we go through the next few, just so we can remind people on these varying scenarios, because let's go ahead and look at the Lake Bannin projections. And these are, again, from LCRA, and we thank them for these maps. You can see the past there is about 2/3 of this graphic, shows you what Lake Bannin has done over the last year. And you can see it was slowly declining as we were largely seeing our drought get worse and worse. And then late June and into July, it really jumped up significantly to the point that it reached full, where the elevation of the lake reached 1,020 feet above mean sea level. So it got to full, and then you could see those dashed lines going into the future about what varying scenarios could mean for the future of Lake Buchanan going forward. And remember, the bottom right there are the dates. So we start with August 1st. We know what the lake was doing then. It was full, basically. And then you can see September, October, November, December, and then the first month or so of next year, all the way through February 1st of 2026. So under the wet conditions, again, the 25th percentile, which means that 25% of years are wetter, but most years, 75%, would have been drier. You could see we're basically keeping Lake Buchanan at full almost the entire time. Right now it's 99% full, but under wet conditions going through the future, it would be staying at full. Can't get any higher than full. Lake Buchanan does not have a flood pool of extra storage, so anything above full gets pushed down through the Highland Lakes, and then eventually would make its way into Lake Travis, as long as Lake Travis had room.
And this lake particularly didn't start off as low as Lake Travis did, right?
Well, from an elevation perspective, Lake Buchanan is higher up. But it did not see as big of a rise as Lake Travis. You're right. Lake Travis had a much bigger deficit. It was many more feet below average than Lake Buchanan was before this wet period started, and of course the historic flooding there in early July. So yes, Lake Buchanan was still lower than it should be, but not by as much. From my memory, I think it was about 8 feet, 9 feet below average or something, compared to Lake Travis, which was something like 30 feet below average. Again, this is just from my memory there. But you could see it was a significant rise in late June and early July of Lake Buchanan to bring it to full.
And these projections look like they're just going to stay stagnant, same level. They're all pretty similar too, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's some subtle differences. The median conditions, where half of the years would be wetter and half of the years would be drier, does have a little bit of a dip below full, and then it brings it back up to full. And then we start getting in those drier conditions, and those don't really keep it near full, but it's really not too far off either. There's a little bit of a dip there under the dry conditions, and that's where only 10% of years are drier. So that's the 90th percentile there. And then the extreme dry conditions bring it down a little bit more by the time we get into January and early February of next year, but still way above where it was all of the last year. And you can look at the left side of the graph here to show you, in comparison to the last 12 months, even the driest of scenarios, if it didn't rain for the next 5-6 months, it would still be much higher than it was for the last year.
You wanted me to go back to this slide.
Yeah, so just a reminder again on where these scenarios are. They're based on what conditions have been like over the time scale that LCRA is looking at, where a certain percentage of years would have been wetter. The median there, it's sort of in the middle of years, and then dry, and then extremely dry. So that's what all of those hashed lines are looking at. Not quite a wettest scenario on there, but almost a driest scenario there, with the only 1% of years being drier is labeled there. But bottom line, even if we got no more rain for the next 5 months, or just about no more rain, we would still have Lake Buchanan in much better shape than it was all of the last year. So now let's look ahead to Lake Travis.
Oh, that's the wrong.
That's not that. Well, we'll get to Lake Travis as we absorb here this information. And I should mention, as you would be later anyway, that I put together a little blog all about this on KXAN.com for people that are curious more about it. By the way, when we talked last month or a few weeks ago, Esme, LCRA, their July projections, even under the wet conditions there, that was still not enough to account for the extremely wet conditions that we had at the beginning of last July. So the previous projections that came out July 1st, even those, even the wettest scenario, which is the 25th percentile there, would not have imagined Lake Travis or Lake Buchanan going up so much. Okay, so we've now got Lake Travis
that
pulled
started
up.
pretty low.
Yeah, I mean, it was around, what, about 635?
Yeah, in between 640, 630, somewhere in there.
Yeah, and again, that's the elevation of the top of the water compared to sea level.
Mm-hmm.
But it did dramatically go up in early July, as you could see. Incredible rises there.
And that was the month where we saw all of the flooding.
Yeah, I mean, and really that flooding came in just the first few days of the month, but we still had some wet weather into the second week of July, which contributed to the continual rises. But we went from about 637 on July 1st all the way up to about 675 on August 1st. So that was a significant jump there, and a bigger jump in Lake Travis than in Lake Buchanan. But part of that too, albeit a smaller part, would be the fact that Lake Travis, once it got full, it had to pass more water downstream that eventually went into Lake Travis. So Lake Buchanan couldn't keep rising. It had to stop rising because it reached the top of the conservation pool.
Yep.
And as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Esme, Lake Travis does have a flood pool, and it can actually absorb more water than when its conservation pool is full. So if you're curious about that too, we dug into that in a previous episode. All right, so let's talk about the scenarios here then. And there's actually a bit more variety in these scenarios than in the Lake Buchanan scenarios. So under the wet conditions, again, the 25th percentile, meaning only 25% of years would be wetter than these conditions going forward. You see Lake Travis rising to full, which is considered 681 feet above mean sea level, by about November 1st, and then staying that way into early next year or so. And we typically get our second wet season as we get into the fall months. So that would be sort of a contributing factor there into some additional rises. Median conditions, though, with half of the years being wetter, half of the years being drier than that scenario, you see a little bit of a dip, and then you see a rise, but it doesn't quite bring Lake Travis to full, even under those median conditions, by February 1st of next year. However, it looks to be just a few feet shy of full by February 1st. And winter, by the way, is our driest season. So while we don't get a lot of rain or wintry precipitation in winter, we also don't use a lot of water compared to the hotter, drier, well, the hotter months, I should say, not the drier months of summer. We use a lot of water in the summer, which causes a lot of lake level drop. And even though we don't get a lot of rain in the winter, we just don't use a lot of water either. So it still usually allows for at least somewhat of a rise in our lake levels and somewhat of a recovery in our lake levels in the wintertime in an average winter. But then as we look at those dry conditions there, the 90th percentile, where only 10% of years would be drier than this, then we do start to see Lake Travis dropping off closer to 670 than 681. And then the extreme dry conditions, where only 1% of years would have been drier than this scenario, we actually start to see Lake Travis falling below that 670 mark. Now, 670 is not a particularly important mark other than just being a round number ending in a zero. But it does show you more of a variety
of
in
possibilities. Yeah.
Exactly there for Lake Travis. Now, just going back to when Lake Travis fills up, and we talked about this last time, but it is worth noting. There is some room above full in Lake Travis for additional storage. It's called the flood pool, and that allows LCRA to hold some extra water to delay its release downstream.
Where does it hold that water?
It
Right
holds
above?
that water in Lake Travis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just above the 681 foot mark. And it holds that water until it can release it downstream, as long as conditions are safe to be able to do that. And there's various scenarios for that too that we jumped into last time about when and how much LCRA can release that water once it climbs above and into the flood pool in Lake Travis there. So, but even the wet conditions does not bring it above the flood pool. At this point, it takes it to pretty close to that 681 mark and then drops it down. Of course, anything wetter than the 25th percentile of wet conditions would likely cause some additional rises into the flood pool before those rises can then be released. So putting all this together and a reminder there of our scenarios, let's look at what the combined storage would be of Lake Travis and Lake Buchanan. So that's our final map here. This basically includes both lakes, right? Which are the main water supply for Central Texas. And that's why this is all so important. And look at, again, at the past, where we were.
In drought contingency,
We were in the drought contingency plan stage 1, where we dropped below 1.1 million acre feet.
Have we ever gone lower than that?
We have. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but we have had droughts worse than our drought that just basically ended.
Yeah.
But you could see the big rise there in the storage, the combined storage, almost bringing it to that 2 million acre foot stage, which generally is considered when both of them are full. And you can see under the wet conditions there, the 25th percentile again. And a reminder, that means 25% of years are wetter, but 75% of years are drier. So it's a wetter scenario. That does bring the combined lake storage pretty close to full there as we get into the past November and into sort of December, January timeframe. Pretty close to full there. Median conditions, little bit of a drop, and then a slow and steady rise toward, but not quite reaching full on early next year. That would read February 1st. That's what that final
in this
point
prediction, it looks like the wet conditions, median conditions compared to the dry are drastically a bit different.
Yeah, even more different here. Because of the combination of the two there. So it just gives you a general idea where we're at, where we could be going. But I do want you to remember that even though we've outlined these various scenarios, if we are wetter than that wet scenario there, where 25% of years are wetter, that is still a fourth of the years are wetter than that. And that is still a possibility that we could see the rises go up even more quickly. And then there's also those dry scenarios too. LCRA actually put this out on Facebook the other day. The greatest concern going forward for flooding would be if we had very heavy rain downstream of Lake Travis, say in the Austin metro, even into our eastern counties, even below our eastern counties, that saturated the ground, that caused flooding in those areas. And then that same storm system moved up over Lake Travis and the Lake Travis Basin, and then even over the Lake Buchanan Basin. Because then it would limit the releases from Lake Travis and Mansfield Dam downstream because of flooding happening downstream. So that would be sort of the worst case scenario, and the thing that we would be more concerned with going forward. Because of how close to full Lake Travis is now, it's about 90% full. It was 91% full at the beginning of August. That there's not a whole lot of room until we're full there for Lake Travis? Should we say get a tropical system coming in from the southeast
That you've been talking about
Yeah,
recently.
although I don't want to compare that to what we're expecting here this weekend. We don't think it's going to be
as big or
concerning
impactful
as that would be. But if you had a slower moving, bigger, more developed tropical system that moved in from southeast to northwest, and it caused flooding problems and saturation downstream of Lake Travis, then when Lake Travis started to fill up and reached full, LCRA would not be able to release the water downstream as quickly as they would want to necessarily because of the downstream issues, maybe in Austin, eastern counties or below. So something to bear in mind. We were in a better place for storage availability anyway, a couple months ago when we had so much room in both lakes to be able to soak that in. Of course, we needed the water. We've got the water now. Now we start thinking about the concerns with the lakes being
if we get
so
the water
close to full.
Again.
If we were to get more heavy rain coming in, especially rain that came from the southeast to the northwest and saturated downstream first. If the rain came in from the other direction, northwest to southeast, then we would be able to release the water downstream into those areas that had yet to receive the water before it moved. Again, LCRA are the ones that make those calls and those decisions, and they have all the experience needed with this sort of thing. But that is something that they mentioned in one of their social media posts the other day.
Which is also another reason why all viewers, anyone living here in Central Texas, should always keep an eye out on tropical systems happening out away from us, because like the 4th of July, that was a tropical system that was in Mexico, far away from us, and you may think, oh, it's not going to impact me, but later on in the week it could.
Yeah, the leftovers of that moisture of what was Tropical Storm Barry made it into Central Texas and then had no place to go and just kept reinvigorating itself and redeveloping, I should say.
And the tropical
continual
storm
rain.
season isn't over, right?
Yeah. Hurricane season, we haven't even reached the peak of it yet, which is September 10th. So we still got a ways to go. We've got Tropical Storm Erin out in the Atlantic. That's expected to become a major hurricane, although not expected to come anywhere near Central Texas. But then we also have that area of potential development in the Gulf near the Bay of Campeche, or moving into the Bay of Campeche, that may turn into either a tropical depression or tropical storm. Even if it doesn't, still the moisture from that likely brings us boosted rain chances later Friday and especially on Saturday. And we still, as we're recording this now here at 3:30 in the afternoon, there's some spotty showers in spots already, unrelated to what's happening in the Gulf, though. But yes, we'll be watching it all. And of course, we'll keep you updated here over the coming days and on KXAN.com under the weather and traffic tab. Then you click on weather blog there in the second column. And then you can see all of the weather blogs that we've done. You can go ahead and click on that unless it's still loading.
I think I've broken it.
Oh, no, the internet broke. See, my story broke the internet.
Your story literally broke the internet.
Oh, well, it's on there at KXAN.com under the weather and traffic tab. Click on weather blog. And it should work for you at home.
Yes, hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Nick, for joining me. I know you got to go be on air, so let's wrap things up. Thank you for joining me again, and we will see you next week here on KXAN Plus.
Thanks, Esme.